Louise Day Hicks was born October 16, 1916, in South Boston, Massachusetts. Hicks grew up predominantly in the Irish middle class, living in an estate on the city's point section at the peninsula tip. Her father, William J. Day, was a Democratic district court judge. He became the main role model for her. Louise was a graduate from Boston University's School of Law after Wheelock's Teacher College. She was one of the 9 women in the class of 1955, so she became close with the minority group in the school, like the few women and blacks. Louise Day Hicks was inspired by her father. She felt obligated to carry on his business after her father's death, which she called the turning point in her life. Before he died, he told her to take care of his people, which implied that she should continue his legacy.
After practicing law with her brother, Hicks won a seat on the Boston School Board in 1961, and 2 years later became the chairperson. In 1967, she was the first woman ever to run for mayor, but lost the election. In 1969, she won the election to the Boston City Council. Hicks also won a vacant seat in the U.S. House of Representatives in 1970, but soon returned back to her law practice in Boston, where she created an anti-busing group called ROAR, or Restore Our Alienated Rights. In 1973, Hicks was re-elected back into the Boston City Council, serving 4 terms. Louise Day Hicks died in her South Boston home on October 21, 2003.
To stop the integration of Boston public schools, Hicks enforces the de jure segregation tactic and was for segregation being forced by the law, as opposed to de facto segregation, which is school being segregated based on its location. Hicks took a subtle yet effective path to prevent busing. She would give up or refuse state funding that would have helped the Boston schools greatly in many ways, including the continuation of the busing situations in Boston. She once stated that she would rather lose all state funds than accept busing. She gave up about $52 million worth of funding.
Her first political office came when she won the election to the Boston School Committee, which she chaired from 1963 to 1965. She clashed with the NAACP over a proposal to integrate Boston schools by busing students to different districts to achieve racial balance. Hicks gained national attention by her actions to prevent South Boston integration. She criticized Boston schools as being a scapegoat for those who failed to solve the housing, economic, and social problems of the black citizen. However, she often avoided the issue entirely. When an NAACP report declared that 13 schools are more than 90% black and lacking school funding, Hicks, as chairwoman of the Boston School Committee, decided to kindly proceed to educational matters. A former president of the Boston School Committee declared that she would not admit segregation exists.
The saying, "You know where I stand," which she often used, soon became her slogan. It implied that she was against busing. This slogan, in many ways, was a coded racist message about integrating Roxbury students into South Boston public schools. By simply stating, "You know where I stand," she didn't have to outright explain what she thought on the segregation issue, but people got a pretty good idea of what side she chose on the segregation issue, that to be against busing means she was against integration. Another example of how Hicks used these coded racist messages to stop desegregation is Hicks' opinion on the school being integrated, when she stated, a racially imbalanced school is not educationally harmful, showing her feelings how integration is not necessary. To appear not racist, Hicks even refused to meet with Governor George C. Wallace of Alabama because he was a passionate racist. Hicks told a reporter that she did not want to appear connected with him because she was not bigoted.
Hicks didn't want to sound racist because she didn't want to be seen as the Bull Connor of the North. Her goal was to prevent integration and appear non-racist. Despite her not wanting to sound racist, her actions subtly attacked the forced busing integration system, which in some ways were just as bad as the fire hoses and riots held on peaceful protesters in the South. The outcome of Hicks's decisions greatly influenced a generation of politicians who were influenced and followed her tactics and her decisions, bringing about more subtle ways of attacking not only racial issues, but other issues that followed. Hicks also increased racial animosity and dislike throughout Boston, only continuing the racial hate and torment. Hicks was the master of complex and coded messages and was racist without ever having to outright say it. And so her campaign will forever be recognized as the riddle of Louise Day Hicks.